Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Again, I'm really delighted, really delighted to see this room absolutely packed for what is an incredibly...
When freedom of expression and free speech, whether it's from journalists or writers, is repressed. That's what we're going to unpick here today. We have almost 2 hours. We have to stop a little bit before 3 o'clock because the Special Rapporteur has to go and present a report to the Human Rights Council. I will introduce all of our fantastic panelists to you shortly, but first let me welcome His Excellency Christophe Payot, the Permanent Representative of Belgium, who's going to kick us off with some opening remarks.
Thank you, Imogen. Good afternoon to all of you, dear colleagues, Madam Special Rapporteur, dear Russian human rights defenders. It's a very great honor for me to welcome you today to this important 2-hour discussion on the human rights situation in the Russian Federation for this event organized together with the missions of Poland and our Benelux partners of the Netherlands and Luxembourg, as well as 35 other co-sponsoring states. So indeed the large turnout today shows the importance of the topic, so thank you for being with us. 3 years ago, the Human Rights Council established the mandate of the Special Rapporteur on the human rights situation in the Russian Federation, based on grave concern over systematic crackdowns on civil society, reported mass arbitrary arrests, and the deterioration of the rule of law. Since then, the authorities' campaign of repression has only accelerated, and we face an ever-worsening crisis. Mrs. Mariana Katsarova, Special Rapporteur, who is with us today, published, as you know, last week our 3rd report. Her findings paint again a sobering picture of deepening repression and a brutal crackdown on dissent, attesting the broad scale of violations within Russia. It depicts a state that fears its own citizens and governs through intimidation and terror. Based on those elements, Belgium, together with the Benelux as co-penholders in a core group of 26 states, seeks to renew the mandate of the Special Rapporteur. Belgium expresses its utmost concern about the closed civic space and the continuing systematic crackdown on civil society and dissenting voices in Russia. Fundamental freedoms are curtailed. Independence of the judiciary and guarantees of fair trial do not exist. Thousands of people have been criminally prosecuted for political reasons. Over the last year, we have seen a widespread and systemic application of oppressive legislation to further strengthen the Russian state's oppressive hold over its own population and society. Addressing Russia's internal repression is first and foremost a matter of human rights, rule of law, and international obligations. But thriving democracies are also essential for regional and international stability. We have seen it through the war waged against Ukraine, as well as through Russian reckless provocations in the skies of Europe over the last few weeks. We call upon the Russian government to take immediate action to end the prevailing climate of repression and impunity, bring domestic laws in line with Russia's international commitments, release all political prisoners, and ensure impartial and independent investigations into all human rights violations in order to hold perpetrators accountable. We call on Russia to comply with its human rights obligations. A formal withdrawal from the European Convention Against Torture, as recently announced, would remove the latest safeguard against torture and signal its normalization as state policy. Ladies and gentlemen, today outstanding panelists will share with us the reality they face under Russian oppression. I want to thank them for their courage and acknowledge the crucial importance of their testimony to help us understand the wide range of Russian violations of human rights. They spoke up against an authoritarian regime despite the grave personal cost. I know that hearing directly from them will make our work here in Geneva even more meaningful. I'm grateful for your presence and I'm eager to listen to your stories. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Payo. Now just a little housekeeping about how we're going to run this debate. We're going to hear first from Mariana Katsarova. She has written her latest report, The Sword and the Pen, the Brutal Repression of Truth and Culture in Russia. And then we're going to hear from people who have experienced this repression themselves. I will just introduce them briefly. On my left here I have Svetlana Alexeyevich. She is a writer, a Nobel laureate for literature in 2015. She has written some beautiful books. I have some of them on my bookshelf, in fact. But her books are banned in Russia now. Then just next to...
in the schools.
In the schools.
Not yet everywhere.
Well, okay.
It's next.
Okay. Right, in schools. Next to Mariana, we have Boris Akunin, very famous author, sentenced in absentia in Russia to 14 years in prison, basically for suggesting that the war, the full-scale invasion of Ukraine was not such a grand idea. He lives now in London. Next to him, we have Alsu Kurmasheva, Russian journalist for the Tatar-Bashkir service, a former political prisoner, and she was freed in last year's historic prisoner swap. And right at the end, Vladislav Yespenko, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, a Ukrainian journalist, also a former political prisoner who was released just in June from a Russian detention center. So all of them with very personal stories to tell us about the repression of the right to free speech, to creativity. First, I will hand the floor to Mariana, who will tell us about her report, the overview, then we'll get to the individual accounts.
We're sharing a microphone. And Imogen Folks, our absolutely preferred moderator of all times on all events of Russia, even in New York. Thank you, Imogen, for kindly agreeing to, again, lead our group. I'm incredibly honored, first and foremost, to be on my right side next to three incredible people. Imogen described them. Boris Akunin, always has been a dream to meet him, just reading his books. He is a legend in Russia and outside. And also, of course, we would have never seen her among us if not for this historic prisoner swap. 8 countries participated. The ambassadors of these countries are here today. I'm not going to name you, but thank you again. Also, Kurmasheva is here because of your efforts. And next is the Ukrainian journalist Vladislav Yespenko. I'm not introducing them, I'm just giving gratitude. He was tortured, he was kept for 4 years, even before the full-scale invasion. And as you know, I committed in March, I said, if up to me, at side events at the UN, I will always be proposing to have one Ukrainian former detainee from Russian prisons until all Ukrainian civilian detainees come home to Ukraine. And Vladislav is here. Svetlana Alexeyevich is a hero of mine, and I became the human rights defender going to war zones and prisons in my life because I read her book at 17 about the Soviet women in World War II, which was then censored, and only in the perestroika released, actually with the comments by the censor, why parts was censored. I read it at 17, The Unwomanly Face of War. I highly recommend it. And Svetlana is also the winner of the Anna Politkovskaya Award, which my organization has been awarding for 18 years before I became the special rapporteur. Now I'm not involved. Thank you, ambassadors, for the support. Benelux, our bank holders, and Poland, and the other 35 plus that are here in the room. We chose a small room so people could be standing on the back. This is what they gave us. My report, as you know, I'm speaking at 3 o'clock. It was supposed to be before this side event, so now you'll be the first to hear a few things, and then I will run on stage. I claim in this report that something I never believed is possible. It's the third report to you, the Human Rights Council, that the repression, the dismantling of civil society, of all the freedoms of association, of assembly, of expression, the persecution and crackdown on journalists, on writers, on religious figures, on the lawyers, on common citizens whose crime is only that they wrote something in dismay about the war crimes of Russia in Bucha, in Ukraine, in Mariupol, or during this continuing 4 years war already against Ukraine. For these crimes, they get prosecuted, they get criminal charges on a variety of instruments that the Russian authorities have employed to crush any dissent and any anti-war expression. The latest of these tools is mobilizing and abusing the national security legislation which exists in many countries of the world on treason, espionage, confidential cooperation with the foreign state, and the public safety legislation which exists in many states. It's counter-terrorism, counter-extremism. They have now weaponized it as the newest part of this strategy. So the majority of the anti-war and activists or dissenters or writers such as Boris Akunin. Boris just received 14 years on charges of justifying terrorism for his statements in defense of Ukraine and against the war. But there are many, many more charged and imprisoned on extremism and terrorism charges. And these repressions are getting more and more massive after the Supreme Court decisions both on the LGBT movement being pronounced extremist, and last year the so-called separatist movement, which actually contained indigenous peoples organizations, national minorities. Later in the year, in December, the authorities put 172 NGOs, many of them of indigenous people and ethnic minorities, on the list, on the special official list of terrorists. This all means that these people, the variety of them, could be charged and then imprisoned for just displaying a symbol of extremist organization, like in the case of LGBT, of the rainbow flag, or anybody, even people who went to Navalny's funeral, or journalists who wrote stories about Navalny's funeral and death in detention. They have been designated as extremists, and many of them imprisoned for this. Russia is now run through a state-sponsored system of fear and punishment, where dissent is erased and civic space dismantled. And it's escalating, if we could even imagine it. So it hasn't reached really rock bottom yet. Along with the foreign agent and undesirable organizations laws, now the national security provisions are weaponized and used as systematic tool of repression, combining stigma, penalties, and isolation. Human rights defenders, journalists, lawyers, and political opponents are systematically prosecuted, tortured, and silenced. Anti-war dissenters and activists are serving years in prison, not for crimes, but for courage. And now, you should know that we again have more than 20, I think, Russian human rights defenders visiting with us in Geneva. They will be in the room. This is the leadership of the Russian human rights movement from inside and outside Russia. The ones inside, of course, for security reasons, we're not photographing, they're not going to speak at our side events. but just to tell you they're here, they're with us, in order for us to show them that they're not forgotten, they're not silenced because they're refusing to be silenced, and they have been great partners for my mandate in getting the facts and the cases out of Russia about persecutions. Now, 245 organizations have been banned as undesirable in Russia, which also, like foreign agents, carries stripping them of funding. They're banned from providing education and being totally isolated. Reprisals for communication with the UN human rights mechanisms, including with my mandate. It's also in the report. The Russian authorities have employed this strategy of trying to first ban the organization inside Russia and then go to the ECOSOC committee of the UN and asking for them to be stripped from accreditation. Indigenous organizations, small human rights organizations from the regions of Russia are being persecuted that way. And also human rights defenders. One, in my report, the latest case, is somebody who is relating to and receiving funds, and this is how they exist in Siberia, a tiny organization dealing, but huge in meaning, with torture in Russian prisons. And when the security services came, they confiscated torture victims' testimonies, plus the internal reports that this organization was sending to the UN Fund for Victims of Torture. This event is particularly about the brutal assault on truth and culture, on journalists and cultural figures, because I, and I think all of you, are convinced that culture and the word, the written word, and the work of journalists exposing the war crimes, exposing the repression, is what is shedding light for the future. This is where the hope lies. And I think the Russian authorities know it, and the masterminds of the strategy to crush dissent and opposition in Russia have now gone deeper into crushing the cultural figures, the written word, and the truth that journalists are trying to bring. Maria Ponomarenko was sentenced on a prolonged imprisonment and sent to Siberia for a prison colony for writing about Bucha, for writing about the atrocities of the Russian army. She continued in prison to be against the war. She has been put in such torturous conditions that in 1 week, several weeks ago, she tried 3 times to commit suicide. Your colleagues, Boris, because you spoke to me about them and you will speak more, Evgenia Berkovich and Petrichuk, 2 theater women. Berkovich wrote a series of poems against the war. She's been, and her colleague Petrichuk, in detention, imprisoned. The Evgenia Berkovich's children are left with very elderly parents to take care of them. They are there because their fault is poetry and the written word. I will also say that about the Ukrainians, that Russia is now the 3rd biggest jailer of journalists in the world. It has 50 journalists in prison, and 29 of them are Ukrainian reporters, like Vladislav. Subjected to torture, coerced to confess to crimes that they never committed. Similarly to the thousands of Ukrainian civilians that are languishing in Russian prisons, deported to Russia or kept on the occupied territories, and their crime just being Ukrainian civilians. They're not on charges, they're kept incommunicado under despicable torture. And as you know, I've spoken in this audience about Natalia Vlasova, who testified at her hearing, civilian woman, that she was gang raped by 15 armed Russian men repeatedly, raped with a bottle, And then her teeth were filed down with a metal file. She received 18 years and 2 months imprisonment on terrorism-related charges. So she is in Russian prisons at the moment. Victoria Roshina, the journalist who for 6 months her body wasn't returned to her parents, 27-year-old reporter, and her body was finally returned to Ukraine in a body bag with unidentified male written on it, with body parts missing. She was killed in Russian detention, one of those journalists. Irina Danilovich, a medical professional and a journalist abducted in 22 from Crimea, now imprisoned for 7 years, denied medical care despite her very serious medical condition. I have written to governments and given the list of these 20, particularly these 20 Ukrainian civilian women after torture in despicable conditions, and ask for your support for their anything for their release on humanitarian grounds. I've been trying to meet the Pope, the new Pope, together also with Russian NGOs, Memorial and others who were the Ukrainian NGOs who were trying to meet the Pope. Anybody who could be the interlocutor for these people to be released, including the political prisoners from Russia. Extremely important that we don't forget them for other political considerations that are not so fashionable maybe right now to talk about the Russian political prisoners or the Ukrainian detainees. We should not forget them. They are in Russia. And this is an internal matter of the Russian Federation's human rights situation. I, for the first time in this report, and that's the last thing I will say to you for now, is that I documented firsthand. I put enormous effort to speak firsthand with victims of torture, Ukrainian civilian and prisoners of war detainees who were directly tortured by Russian doctors and medical personnel. These doctors, I documented cases like Andrei Perevezev, who was Ukrainian prisoner of war, actually from Kharkiv, from a small village in Kharkiv region. And when I asked him, can we speak in Russian or Ukrainian, he said, I don't speak Ukrainian, but I would have found an interpreter. He said, I don't speak Ukrainian, we are close to the Russian border, we're Russian-speaking Ukrainians. He was wounded, and this is how he was taken prisoner by the Russian army. He was then subjected to surgery by a Russian doctor who was visiting from Moscow on a stint to the military in the war zone, and he did his job very well. He provided a good job in the surgery of the wounded soldier, and when he woke up from anesthesia, he saw that this doctor has burned on his stomach this extra service, glory to Russia, and the letter Z being burned on his stomach. This is a medical doctor, and many others. You will find it in my report as first-hand findings of the participation of doctors in torture. One thing in the end is, you will see in my recommendations, it's just about time that we create an official and effective international mechanism for the immediate and unconditional return of all deported Ukrainian civilians held in detention in Russia, including the deported children, regardless of the status or outcome of any peace talks, with the due involvement of the International Committee of the Red Cross. We need to be creative, out of the box. The times demanded, and don't forget about the Russian political prisoners who are in prison because they were against the war. These two groups are together in their fate and suffering the same torture at the hands of the Russian authorities. And it's clear to me that justice inside Russia is unattainable. Perpetrators enjoy total impunity. And I think we shouldn't wait for Russia to, I am asking them and demanding they do it, but there won't be justice inside Russia. I know it's difficult, but please look with your prosecutors and lawyers and legal experts in your countries. There must be a way forward for the use of universal jurisdiction and international mechanisms to prosecute torture and other serious crimes committed by the Russian authorities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mariana, for that overview of your report. I would urge you all to read it from cover to cover if you haven't yet, because it is a very detailed account of repression and how it becomes so much easier to commit the kind of acts you were talking about when there is no watchful eye of the media and there is no separation of powers, i.e. with lawyers, because we know lawyers are also, lawyers who try to really uphold the law in Russia are also being repressed. From there, and I should have said you will get a chance to ask questions towards the end, but we're first going to hear from our speakers. I'm going to start with Svetlana Alexeyevich. We've heard the broad account of what's happening in Russia, but our focus today is particularly the repression of free speech, whether it be journalists, whether it be writers. So I'd like you, Svetlana, to give us your own personal thoughts about that. Svetlana will speak in Russian. You have the simultaneous interpretation through your headphones.
Дело в том, что нейтрализовать писателей и вообще искусство – это, конечно, дело любой авторитарной системы, потому что они понимают, что даже сегодня, когда есть некоторое разочарование в слове, все равно слово – это то, что остается после всего. Вот Марьяна рассказывала, приводила примеры, это свидетельство, это слово. И сегодня, я думаю, искусство не успевает в целом написать какой-то «Войну и мир» своего времени. И оно находится в стадии свидетельствования. Вот сегодня то, что мы все должны сделать, и искусство, это засвидетельствовать то, что происходит. Время осмыслить даже по-настоящему этого нету. И я могу сказать вот о собственном писательском опыте. У меня много отношений с государством. Мою первую книгу 3 года не печатали, за вторую книгу меня судили настоящим судом. Но воевать с государством – это то, к чему писатель русский, белорусский, на этом постсоветском пространстве, он привык, он умеет. Это целая традиция историческая, как воевать с государством. Но вот появилось что-то новое. Надо воевать с собственным народом. Я помню, когда была у нас революция в 20-м году, и, казалось бы, люди, которых я даже знала, они меня узнавали на улице, но я часто слышала и, в общем-то, тех, кто за Лукашенко, кто поддерживает Лукашенко. И это была достаточно такая агрессивная позиция. И вот этого мы не умеем, не знаем, как делать. Русский художник Александр Кабаков как-то сказал, и мне нравятся его слова, что когда мы воевали с коммунизмом, когда он существовал как идея, как огромное государство, мы знали, что делать, мы нравились себе, мы были красивы в этой борьбе. И вот мы победили. Результатом больших жертв это чудовище. И когда оглянулись через короткое время, оказалось, что надо жить среди крыс. А вот как воевать с крысами, вот с этим множеством человеческих чудовищ, которые живут в самом человеке, и которые получили свободу, вырвались на свободу, вот этого опыта у нас нет. И это действительно большая проблема. И сейчас, когда я пишу новую книгу, пишу эту книгу о том, что происходит сегодня с белорусской революцией, с войной на Украине, Что вообще происходит с человеком? Когда-то в своей последней книге «Время секонд-хенд» я имела неосторожность, но мы все в 90-е годы были романтиками, написать, что конец красного человека. Оказалось, я была не права, красный человек сидит сегодня в Кремле, красный человек воюет на Украине. И я поняла, что надо написать новую книгу, засвидетельствовать то, что происходит сегодня, то, как это стало возможно, что мы в 90-е годы представляли после социализма совсем другой мир. Я бы могла сказать, что те люди, которых я расспрашиваю, они еще 10 лет назад говорили, когда я им задавала вопрос, какой вы мир хотели после социализма? Никто не сказал мне, что он хочет, капитализм хотел. Все говорили, что они представляли, что это будет какой социализм, но с человеческим лицом. Мы были романтиками. Мы совершенно жили вдали от большого мира. Мы не знали даже по каким законам это все движется без насилия. И вот сегодня, когда это все открылось, то мы увидели, ну, например, я могу сказать о собственном потрясении, кончились выборы, и народ вышел на улицы в Белоруссии. И к вечеру это была страшная битва. Людей летели светошумовые гранаты, в них стреляли резиновыми пулями, а резиновая пуля с 10 метров бьет, как боевая. И где-то через несколько дней мне принесли фотографии. Это были куски мяса, а не люди. Это такими их выбрасывали из тюрьмы, чтобы они там не умерли, а чтобы их забрали родители, и это где-то спряталось в народе. И я задала себе вопросом, на который и сегодня, когда пишу книгу, встаю вот из-за стола с глазами полными слез, хотя это я не считаю таким большим достоинством. Хирург, разрезав живот больного, не плачет же над ним, он должен что-то делать. И я вот пытаюсь найти ответ на вопрос, почему животное так близко в человеке? Где эти люди были, которые вот творили это со своими же, с теми же белорусами, которыми были они сами? Они ездили с нами в одних автобусах, они сидели с нами в одних ресторанах, они были в одних магазинах, они были же такие, как мы. Что же произошло? Как это произошло? И вот, наверное, сегодня нам, если говорить о том, в каком мире мы оказались, нам сегодня не хватает какого-то нового осмысления. Как насилие действует сегодня? По каким законам? Почему оно смогло так быстро в течение нескольких десятков лет выплеснуть на наши улицы, превратиться в огромную войну в центре Европы? И уже вот в программе Соловьева, известного сторонника Путина, уже спокойно сидят люди, смеясь, говорят, да мы там замочили за один день там 200 человек. Кто-то говорит, да мы и больше, там 300 человек. Это их приглашает он военных, которые были, только с фронта приехали. То есть уже мгновенно в лексику вошла какая-то милитаризованная лексика, вошло какое-то другое понимание жизни. И мы даже сами, вот даже писатели, которые должны были бы как-то это даже описать и назвать, мы, конечно, не знаю, что скажет Борис, но я думаю, я лично в растерянности, как это назвать, как найти для этого слова. А именно Их надо найти, эти слова. Пусть они пахнут Бучей, пусть они пахнут всеми этими ужасами и кошмарами. Эти слова надо найти, потому что без слов люди становятся страшнее. Без тех нужных слов, которые происходят и в этой жизни рождаются, и надо их сформировать, люди и мир становятся еще страшнее. И, как видите, те, у кого сегодня власть, пытаются заставить нас замолчать. Вот я вынуждена жить в эмиграции, Борис тоже, еще и получить уголовные сроки. Это десятки писателей так сегодня. Идешь я живу сейчас в Берлине, идешь по Берлину и везде встречаешь, очень часто встречаешь людей, больших русских писателей, людей другого искусства, которых ты никогда бы не мог увидеть, которых ты видел только в телевидении, они идут по этому городу, выброшены совершенно в новую жизнь и вынуждены сегодня по-новому осмыслить опыт 17-го года, когда вот эту умную, главную Россию тоже страна выбросила за пределы России. И, в общем-то, то искусство, которое вернулось к людям в 90-е годы и создало основу, создало достоинство русской культуры и других культур, которые были на постсоветском пространстве, оно было создано за пределами, в основном, России. Там удалось сохранить достоинство. Сегодня, я думаю, и нам надо тоже попытаться это сделать, пережить еще наново этот опыт и найти новые слова. И это странно. Я помню свое ощущение, когда начиналась война в Украине, никто из нас не верил, но это было, как будто ты живешь в каком-то, в Средневековье еще не было такого оружия, как танки, но танки шли к границам России и Украины, и это показывало телевидение со Владивостока, со всех мест огромной этой России. И это было такое странное ощущение, как будто мы поместились совершенно в другое время. Мы еще даже не знали тогда, мы еще все надеялись, что эти танки не будут стрелять. Мы даже не знали, как мир весь будет брошен на полвека назад. И это случилось. И это наша жизнь, к сожалению, наша единственная жизнь. И в общем-то, этому надо противостоять. Как? Мы противостоим и учимся это делать.
Thank you very much, Svetlana. I find that very moving, actually, because I think a lot of people will share your feeling of, I can't quite get my head around how to respond to how things are right now and how things seem to have changed. Mariana reminded me, I'm sure everybody here actually knows that I should have pointed out that you're actually Belarusian, half Ukrainian. But I think everybody knows, actually. I certainly do. I will come now next to you, Mr. Akunin, for your own personal interpretation and experience of what this means, the repression of the word, of creativity, of freedom of expression.
Well, mine is not a tragical case. I haven't been to prison, I haven't been arrested, and being sentenced to 14 years in prison in absentia is like being beheaded in absentia. Doesn't hurt. Where it does hurt a bit is that now my name is in Russia has become very toxic, and because of that I am going to speak not about I had been wanting to speak, naming some names of my colleagues in Russia who are in need of your support and aid and all that. Because lawyers and relatives told me that I might be doing them around surface. So there won't be any names. Just let me describe my personal case, not because it is tragical or even very important, but because it is a textbook case on how a dictatorship crushes culture, literature, cancels names, bans cultural phenomena. It doesn't happen like this. It doesn't happen in one moment. What they do in different countries, and it might happen in other countries as well, is they use the so-called salami tactics. It is a term which was introduced by the Hungarian communist leader Matyas Rákosi in the end of the 1940s when they were crushing democracy there. It means you take something big and you slice, 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 unless nothing is left. So let me tell you how it worked in my case, how I became a salami. So, given you have a popular author, 35 million books of his are kept in Russian families. There are a lot of films, there are a lot of theater shows, whatnot. The task, make him disappear. And in fact, it was a lot of fun to watch. The first thing what they did was quite comical. Theater directors and producers started phoning me and telling me that they asked me either to take your name from the posters or the show is done. I said, okay, take my name from the posters. So for a while, it was absolutely Kafkian. There would be posters with no name of the author. The next level, there was a movement of concerned citizens who didn't want to see the books of this traitor in bookshops. So some of bookshop chains started taking my books away. Then there was this provocation where there was a whole operation. They pretended that it was Vladimir Zelensky who phoned me, and I thought I was speaking to Vladimir Zelensky because writers, as everybody knows, are idiots. And then they took this, they edited it, they cut parts off, and they started showing it everywhere to show to Russian people that I was happy about bombardment of Russian towns, that I was happy about our lads being killed, which I didn't say, but it sounded like that. After that, I was made a terrorist and extremist because I was supporting Ukraine, the terrorist state. So then I was included in the foreign agent lists. Now, being included in foreign agent lists means that practically they make you shut up. You cannot communicate with audiences. Then I was put it on wanted list. Then my publishers said that they were not going to work with me any longer. Then libraries took my books out of the libraries. Then I got my 14 years in prison, this comical prison sentence, which is not comical at all, because it cannot touch me, but it means that for those who are inside Russia, it sets a new level of punishment. So people who are actually in Russia will now be getting 14 years for what they previously were given, I believe, 8 years. So now in Russia, I'm, well, non-existent, only with VPN. And this is how it works in all in different, it doesn't only concern culture, because this is like, you know, slowly strangling culture, slowly strangling a country. So now I see the same thing is happening in my native Georgia, where they started following exactly the same tactics. I'm not sure, it seems to begin to happen in the United States of America as well, because Putin also started with television. So we should feel this danger we should be very careful with it. This is how it works. And I have to say, I know that the time is very short, so just one thing, important thing. I know that many of you see Russia as an ominous, aggressive, threatening country, which it is. But please pay attention to the fact that although the Russian state is aggressive, is dangerous, but the biggest part of Russian culture, the most important names of culture, of journalists, they are not participating in this. They are not working for the evil. They have either emigrated or are in prison. The rest who cannot immigrate, they just shut their mouths. They have no other choice, but they do not participate in this devilry. So please do not think that Russia is finished, that it is ended. No. There are a lot of people there who think differently, who are alive, and who should be supported. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Boris Akunin. Again, really powerful testimony, and something also that I think about quite a lot as a journalist, because we have to write sometimes such very short things, and you write a headline, Russia says, and I'm also thinking this is 140 million people. It's very important, as you say, to separate the aggression coming from the Kremlin versus all of the people like yourself, the writers, the journalists, the artists, the ordinary school teachers, as you say right now, might be keeping their heads low because that's their only choice. But I do think, if I have one message to you guys out there, keep that in mind, because it doesn't help us to paint everybody, into the bad corner or into the good corner. I think we're learning that in all parts of the world at the moment. We will come now to Alsu Kuramasheva. We move from the writers to the journalists, and you will speak in English.
Esteemed ambassadors, dear guests, dear journalists, it's such an honor to share this room and this table with distinguished people who bring a very unique perspective to this conversation. I'm Alsu Kurmasheva. I'm a Russian and American journalist working for Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. I was jailed in Russia for 288 days, and I was released last year in a historic prisoner swap. Here I just want to take 1 second of saying, expressing my gratitude to many governments, and I believe there are ambassadors and representatives of those governments here. I'm here, I'm talking to you only thanks to your efforts, diplomatic efforts, because that prisoner swap last year, where I was released alongside another American journalist, Evan Gershkovich, and Russian politician and historian Vladimir Karamurza, was a triumph, was a victory for international advocacy and diplomacy. I will go back to this. I traveled to visit my ailing mother in October in 2023, when I was detained at the airport and banned from leaving the country. It happened in the city of Kazan in Russia. After 5 months, when I was packing my suitcase to go, I was brutally detained and arrested and put to prison. Later, I was charged with spreading fake information about Russia's military. And what was my crime? My crime was my journalism, that I've been delivering information and balanced news and analysis to my audience, including my native language, in my Tatar language and Russian language, the audience in Russia. And the book that I co-edited, it's a collection of 40 stories by 40 people in Russia who opposed the Russian invasion to Ukraine in the first months of 2022, when it was still possible. That was my alleged crime. And I was held in isolation for the most time of my detention in Kazan. I was tried in a sham court, and I was sentenced to 6.5 years in penal colony. I was cut off my family, my 2 teenage daughters and my husband, my colleagues, for 14 months in total, which 9 of which I spent in prison. And my release was an international victory. And I've been through very tough times, very tough things. And I really don't want anyone, any journalist, any political prisoner to go through that. That's why when I returned back, when I was released, I very naturally took this position of press freedom advocate. I'm not with the newsroom anymore, but I'm still representing Radio Free Europe, because Radio Free Europe still has journalists in prison in Russia. According to Mariana Katsarova's report, there are as many as 50 journalists in Russian prisons. 2 of them are of Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. Nika Novak is being held in Siberia, in a penal colony. She's been through enormous psychological pressure. Konstantin Gabov was sentenced to 5.5 years in April this year. The most difficult moments in prison for me were mornings, when I allowed myself to wake up but not open my eyes, because I wouldn't adjust, even for one morning, that I woke up in prison again and not in my home, in my bed next to my children and my husband. And I didn't adjust, but I made myself think and hope to go through every day while waiting to be either released or pardoned, or I didn't know what would happen, but I wouldn't have survived for 6.5 years. This is exactly what's going through the minds of all imprisoned journalists in Russia, including my colleagues. So I will be raising the cases wherever I can. I'm so grateful to Mariana Katsarova for bringing their names in the report. I think this 3rd report is the most detailed and the most comprehensive report, giving the information about all cases of human rights abuses in prisons and human rights violations in Russia. But to the topic, what we can do a lot. Everybody can focus. I know the world is on fire right now when we talk about press freedom, but journalists will continue doing their job. Radio Free Europe has a 75-year experience of working with closed audiences and delivering lifeline information and news and reports to very closed audiences. We have tools, we have people, we know techniques, we know how to work. I myself joined Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty 27 years ago. It was different times. And we can do it, journalists can do it, the authors can do it, everybody can do something. The governments, the diplomats, the ambassadors can do their own thing. And when I speak of hope, hope is not anything vague and abstract for me. Hope is a strategy, and I really like to talk about strategy when it comes to imprisoned journalists and political prisoners in Russia. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Also, we now come to our last speaker, Vladislav Yaspenko, also Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, Ukraine. He will also speak in Russian.
Добрый день, меня зовут Владислав Осипенко. После российской аннексии Крыма в 2014 году я, как журналист «Радио Свобода», ездил в Крым, где освещал политические и социальные события, делал блиц-интервью с местными жителями, а также вместе с проектом «Крым Реалии», «Радио Свобода» проводил расследования по европейским компаниям, которые продолжали сотрудничать с Россией в Крыму в условиях оккупации. В марте 2021 года, во время выполнения журналистского задания в Крыму, меня задержали сотрудники ФСБ. Чтобы дискредитировать радио «Свобода», в мою машину подбросили гранату. Без всяких следственных действий и адвокатов увезли в подвал, где больше суток били и пытали, пуская через меня ток, с целью признания в шпионаже. В августе 22 года так называемый Крымский российский суд приговорил меня к 5 годам лишения свободы за преступление, которого я не совершал. В июне этого года я вернулся домой, чтобы бороться и рассказать всему миру, что на самом деле делает российская власть независимыми журналистами и людьми, которые имеют другое мнение. Хочу обратить внимание на оккупированный Крым, Донбасс, Запорожскую, Херсонскую области. Везде, где пришла Россия на нашу землю, была полностью уничтожена свобода слова. Только в Крыму в период оккупации было незаконно осуждено 18 украинских журналистов. А обычным людям, высказывающимся в соцсетях против российской войны, дают реальные сроки заключения. Проект «Радио Свобода» был последним главным источником информации, где жители оккупированных территорий могли узнать, что на самом деле у них происходит. С приходом к власти президента Трампа все изменилось. Такие крупные корпорации, как «Радио Свобода», «Голос Америки», вынуждены сокращать свои штаты, проекты и жить с непонятной перспективой на будущее. Мы все помним, что победу в холодной войне принесли не танки, а микрофоны. И то, что не удалось сделать тоталитарным государствам, Советскому Союзу, а потом и России, уничтожить независимые издания, удается Трампу одним росчерком пера. Еще я хотел бы рассказать несколько историй о политузниках, моих друзьях. В тюрьме я познакомился с крымским блогером Евгением Шведом. Парень в соцсетях так писал о России. Есть совок, империя и бесчеловечный режим, который из века в век несет за собой кровь, боль и тьму. За такие высказывания в 2023 году его приговорили к реальному сроку заключения – 2,5 года лишения свободы. Сейчас у меня есть информация, что после освобождения его снова задержали, и не исключено, что дадут новый срок заключения. В 2016 году ФСБ России арестовала в Севастополе украинских журналистов Алексея Бессарабова, Владимира Дудку и Дмитрия Штыбликова. Подтасовывая факты, их сделали диверсантами, а так называемый российский суд приговорил к длительным срокам заключения. Один из журналистов, Дмитрий Штыбликов, отсидев в российской тюрьме 5 лет, не вышел на свободу, а получил новый срок – 19,5 лет лишения свободы. В тюрьме Владимирской области, где сейчас находится крымчанка, 70-летняя Галина Долгополая, которой дали 12 лет за якобы измену родине. И я понимаю, что в таком возрасте это означает смертный приговор. 12 лет лишения свободы дали моему другу, политузнику Константину Ширинку. Выбивая признательные показания, сотрудники ФСБ сломали ему челюсть. Через него пускали ток, присоединяя провода к половым органам. В 2023 году он умер в российской тюрьме из-за неоказания медицинской помощи. В 2024 году была похищена, замучена, а затем и убита в российской тюрьме наша журналистка Виктория Рощина. В этих условиях мы, украинские журналисты, рассчитываем на наших европейских и мировых партнеров и имеем надежду на то, что у нас с вами есть общее видение, как противостоять российской агрессии на фронте и в медиапространстве. И еще хотел сказать, что у меня в телефоне установлен мессенджер. Это сообщение, которое приходит мне во время воздушных тревог. Так вот, эти воздушные тревоги приходят каждый день. Я живу в Киеве. Каждый день люди испытывают прессинг. Они видят, как дроны баллистические ракеты российские прилетают в их дома. Неделю назад в Святошинском районе, где я живу, погибла женщина с маленьким ребенком, 2 года, девочки. Ее звали Полина. Они были уничтожены российским дроном. Чтобы вы понимали, российские дроны сейчас более усовершенствованы. Они несут более сильный заряд, который может уничтожить не просто одну квартиру, а уничтожает целые подъезды. Каждый день в Украине объявляют воздушную тревогу. Я очень переживаю за мою семью. Как правило, эти воздушные тревоги происходят ночью или рано утром. И людям приходится прятаться в бомбоубежищах, а те, у которых нет такой возможности, они сидят в коридоре, в том месте, где меньшая вероятность погибнуть, нет открытых окон. И это все происходит в мирном Киеве, это не на линии разграничения, не там, где идут боестолкновения. Я хочу, чтобы вы об этом знали и помнили. Спасибо.
Thank you very much. Thank you, all of you, for these very different but very moving perspectives. I've got a couple of individual questions for our panelists before we open it to the floor. And first, maybe to Mariana and Boris, because you talked very eloquently about what we called the salami tactic. And from the testimony we've heard today, you know, this starts with an author's name being taken off a poster to the torture and killing of journalists. That's where the logical conclusion, very sadly, appears to be. So I'm wondering, for everybody in this room, we are of course focused on Russia, but this is an example in Russia that we should perhaps all be paying attention to and thinking, what are the warning signs that this kind of creeping repression is coming, and what are the ways that we can stand up to it? Boris and then Boris and then Mariana.
Typically, a sign that cannot be mistaken is an attack on free expression. It can be an attack on a TV channel, a journalist, a cultural figure. That's how it usually starts. That's how we started in Russia in the year 2000, as soon as Vladimir Putin came into power. He crashed just one independent television channel. And after that, it was step by step. And back in the year 2000, we were protesting too mildly because we did not quite understand what was happening. After all, it was just one TV channel. So as soon as, I hope it won't happen, but if it will, in any of your countries, a thing like that happens, mobilize, get together. Don't let this happen. Don't repeat our mistakes. We were too hedonistic. We never thought that regression is possible, but let us face the reality. Now we are living in a world that's getting worse. We are on the black stripe of this zebra. The white stripe, which started with the fall of Berlin Wall, with those wonderful songs from Francis Fukuyama, it's not a reality. History is not finished. We are in the middle of history. We see how irrational, dark forces are attacking normality from both sides, from the far right and from the far left, and it's happening in the countries which have been democratical for many years, and which think that democracy is guaranteed. It is not. It is not. We are living in a new reality. World is going to change very soon. We are on the verge of a new Cold War. I think that everybody understands that, and if not, well, we should, at least you should, because you are people who work with practical politics. You are professionals. So please keep the world from this danger. That's what I wanted to say.
Mariana, obviously this is your third report. What would be your response? What should be setting our alarm bells ringing? How can we stand up to this?
Well, I think these reports are kind of documenting how the manual of repression works and how the strategy carefully orchestrated, invented creatively of the Russian authorities to dismantle freedoms and then go for the aggression to the neighbor by also distorting historical truth and rewriting history, finding new enemies. You know, the enemies could be LGBT people who, you know, are easy actually to be turned into enemies because they're so non-violent as a movement, as a group, or the indigenous people who have been demolished by centuries of occupation, really imperial rule, being kept like subhuman in some of these territories, far away from the big cities of Russia, and now making them into extremists and terrorists. And every group is like that. I think I'm dealing with the manual of repression, but I'm thinking, of course, that this manual, this handbook, is so easily copied by others in other countries, and some in power, some not. And that's the frightening bit. In my own country, in parliament, I'm Bulgarian, some parties are discussing again and again introducing a foreign agent law. And I actually, as a Bulgarian, I will go to parliament. I have already asked to speak to various parliamentary groups, although I don't have time for that, but I'll do it for my country, and explain to them what it means, a foreign agent law of this type, like the Russian one, like Boris was describing the steps of trying to erase culture, erase human rights people, organizations by just stifling them completely through the foreign agent designation. And then, I didn't mention, but all these charges, apart from justifying terrorism for just being against the war, there is also discrediting the army, which also was also additionally charged with discrediting the Russian army, the actions of the Russian army, or spreading fake news about the Russian army, fake information. I mean, this is like, you remember in Orwell in 1984, you know? You have to read it in the opposite, right? Truth is lies, you know, freedom is prison. This is part of this manual. I think it's an absolute strategy, and they are systematically applying it to have the impunity rule and impunity rules, but allowing it to spread its tentacles to our democratic countries, to the rest of the world, to give so much freedom in the hands of populists to turn around our freedoms. I mean, I was thinking, what is our counter manual? What is our counter handbook? We have it, right? It's the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We have it. And I, again, think children should be forced, mandatorily in all our countries, right, forced, to study the Universal Declaration by heart. My mom, bless her memory, forced me one night to study the English alphabet because I didn't want to study it until I was reciting it. So I can speak in English to you right now freely and could recite the alphabet. But we need to recite the alphabet of freedom and human rights, which is the Universal Declaration, and all our conventions. And when I go in a minute to this stage and I hear some other states say, oh, human rights are an internal matter, I cannot bear this statement. And I think we should all just stand up to these statements at the UN. Human rights are not internal matter of any country. Freedoms are not internal matter. We cannot, and we have to be in solidarity and resist this salami attack, which is coming from the country that you have voted me to monitor and deliver to you the new page in the handbook of repression, which I'm doing, waiting for the good news that Russia will turn around. Unfortunately, the Russian Foreign Ministry just published, strangely for the first time, official statement on 9th of September. You can see it in English as well. How much they are against this mandate on Russia, and how much they're not going to communicate with the Russian mandate, with my mandate. And will do all their effort, this confrontational mandate, to actually make it into more peaceful, which really sounded like a threat. Read it for yourself. But this is where we are, and yeah.
Thank you very much. I want to bring our other panelists in quickly before we open this debate to the floor. Svetlana, I'm interested in, from you, such a renowned writer, how, when it gets to this level of repression, how can we protect literature, culture? How do we ensure that, you know, people who are born into a climate of repression don't lose that altogether? And then I have a question for our two journalists, but Svetlana first.
Да, очень интересный вопрос. Я слушала всех, кто выступал, и думала, когда же, что ясно уже, что мы живем в новом мире. И я думала, когда же он начался? И, конечно, экстремальная граница – это коронавирус. И коронавирус создал какую-то экстремальную ситуацию в мире, в каждом человеке, когда, ну, скажем так, мне так кажется, зло раскрепостилось. Оно от биологического зла родился образ возможности вообще выпустить из себя зло. И вдруг активно начался очень меняться мир, очень начались править мир, начали вот эти все вещи происходить. Я думаю, что нам уже жить в этом мире, во всяком случае, нескольким поколениям придется жить в этом мире, и надо научиться в нем жить. Ведь что такое каждый? Вот мы как человек, мы представляем набор каких-то убеждений, каких-то знаний. И я бы думаю, поскольку я сейчас очень много опять расспрашиваю людей, люди, когда доходят вот до последних 50 лет, они говорят, что внутри существовала какая-то расслабленность. Мир, казался, идет по линии вверх. Пусть это будет медленно, так я слышала, мне говорили друзья в Москве, так я слышала в Минске, но он идет. И вдруг вот этот разрыв, вдруг мы оказались совсем в другом мире, в мире, где зло, в общем-то, свободно сейчас. Я думаю, каждый из нас должен как-то мобилизовать в себе вот эту свою возможность этому противостоять, даже мысленно этому противостоять. Потому что вот демократия сегодня отступает. И я думаю, это отступление произошло из-за того, что каждый из нас сказал себе, что это в его силах, что он маленький человек, он не может противостоять этому. Я думаю, что надо себя убедить, что мы что-то можем. Я могу. Я могу, и я буду делать. Вот я слушала сегодня Алсу, такая милая, улыбчивая женщина, и как она говорит о зле. У нее зло даже не страшное. Почему? Потому что у нее силы сопротивления. Я думаю, каждому из нас надо что-то с собой сделать. Надо сделать себя сильнее.
So I think that's one of our watchwords, isn't it? Mobilisation and resistance. Very final question from me to our two journalists here. And it is one journalist to two others. What can we do to support you? There are some of my journalist colleagues I see are also in the room. What can we do while we still have the freedom to express ourselves? Who knows how long that will last?
Thank you for your question. Thank you very much for quoting me here. And Mr. Akunin, you said democracy and press freedom are not for granted, that's for sure. And that's why I was so proud this year. I took part in developing media literacy courses and trainings for high schoolers and university students. This is what I did. This is what was lacking, that was missing from school curriculum. And this is what, and Mariana said, your mom made you learn the English alphabet. This is how we make our children learn something before they even understand why they will need it. And these are small steps that will give an impact later. This is what we can do. This is what educators can do. And I mentioned journalists. Mariana Katsarova urges accountability. Let's start with that. If here in a free world we believe that free press is essential to democracy, why do we leave the cases that journalists are wrongfully detained and unjustly sentenced? Why do we leave those cases without accountability? We have mechanisms, we have tools. We can do something with that, start with that. And then just think about what public media, what journalists do for the societies. Everybody relies on the work of journalists. Journalists are covering the most difficult, pressing crisis, humanitarian crisis, tragedies. We wouldn't know anything about the war in Ukraine without journalists. We wouldn't know anything or any other cases and tragedies, accidents around the world without journalists. So governments, diplomats, everybody needs us. So it's, I'm talking as a journalist now, it's a huge responsibility. It's a huge responsibility, and we really understand that as journalists, that it's very hard to deliver fact-based and objective reporting to everyone who needs it, but the journalists will continue doing that. So those are the things everybody can do. I believe that the authors can find, as Svetlana said, right words to address their readers. Journalists can find the right means to address their audiences. Diplomats can find their own ways and tools to work and reach. Actually, we are here talking at the UN. It's the only place where all opinions and people can get together, and not to come to the common sense immediately, but to raise any questions and in the same room.
Vladislav?
У меня короткий ответ. Давайте каждый из нас будет делать свое дело, даже когда тяжело или страшно. Спасибо.
Your chance, which is, as usual, since we're inside the UN, governed a little bit by protocol. I know that we have an intervention from the Netherlands. There you are, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for moderating this session. I represent the Kingdom of the Netherlands, and we are happy to be a co-organizer of this event together with our close partners, Belgium, Luxembourg, and Poland. Let me first of all sincerely thank all the panelists for your powerful and your moving testimonies. And we will continue to stand with those whose voices the Russian authorities seek to silence. Mrs. Katsurova, your report and the testimonies of these brave voices of dissent demonstrate why your mandate is needed more than ever. And as the Netherlands, we are committed, together with the other members of the core group, and I hope many other countries, to work towards the extension of your mandate. And a few words specifically on journalism and journalists. From the start of your mandate, you have documented how independent journalism and journalists have been systematically criminalized, and you describe in all details how that works. And as you also referred to in your remarks, it's really shocking to read and to know that Russia is today the third largest jailer of journalists in the world. And reporters are prosecuted not for crimes, but for telling the truth, which we strongly condemn. This assault on free expression, the cornerstone of any free, inclusive and democratic society. But we also act, we need to act. First, we need to continue to look for ways to provide sustained support to protect all those that are being targeted. And what we also do as the Netherlands, support projects that defend press freedom and strengthen the resilience of independent media. And we also need to provide a safe haven for those who are exiled, so that their voices will not be silent. So for instance, in the Netherlands, the Moscow Times, founded by the late Dutch journalist Dirk Sauer in 1992, has played a unique role as an independent source of news, both for Russians and for the international community. Forced out of Moscow by repressive law, it continues its vital mission from Amsterdam, reaching millions with uncensored reporting. And likewise, TV Rain, now broadcasting under a Dutch license, exemplifies resilience in the face of censorship. So, let me be clear, silencing the press, silencing writers is not a sign of strength, it's a confession of fear. Fear of facts, fear of accountability, fear of citizens who can think independently. So we call for the immediate release of all imprisoned journalists in Russia. And we will continue to support independent voices until truth and objective facts prevail over censorship and fear. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to have to stand up to see if there's anybody else would like to come in. France.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much for your strong words and for the powerful testimonies of the panelists today. And finally, also for your call for resistance that I think resonates very strongly for us today. I must say I'm very moved to see you on the panel, and especially Mrs. Alexeyevich, because when I read your book, La fin de l'homme rouge in French, I think the last of the Soviets in English, the translator will correct me. It was one of the most shocking read that I had in the last decades, and I think it's a very important book to understand the Russian society today. So thank you very much for that. Your testimonies today, and also the accurate and factual reports that you have produced, Madame Special Rapporteur, highlight the extent of the repression by the Russian authorities, which trample on all civil liberties, freedom of association, assembly, expression, both online and offline. It also affects all components of civil society, as you said, human rights defenders, independent journalists, and media, artists, and opponents of Russia's war aggressions against Ukraine. And of course, as you clearly stated, we cannot forget the flagrant and widespread human rights violation that Russia has committed in the occupied territory of Ukraine since 2014 and during its large-scale invasion of Ukraine, launched in February 2022. France salutes the courage and pays tribute to all those who defend rights and freedoms, often at the risk of their lives, as you so strongly recalled. France will remain steadfast alongside human rights defenders, journalists, and artists who are fighting for freedom, and will continue to offer them refuge and protection. And thank you very much.
Thank you Thank you very much. I see we have Spain and then Greece. So Spain, we'll come to you first, then go to Greece.
Thank you very much, Mother Pitcher, and thank you also to all the organisers of this meeting. And first of all, allow me to express my admiration to the 5 panelists for what you're doing on a daily basis with your work and your testimony. I have a question related to the notion that was proposed by Mr. Akunin on the fact that, of course, Russia is much more than the current regime. There's a Russian culture there, that it remains, and we have to keep to do our best to keep our contact with them. At the same time, Ms. Alexeyevich spoke about Solovyov's program, about how the regime is changing society. Putin has been in power for 25 years now, more than Stalin, and he is very deftly using all different mechanisms to change society, from education to manipulation of media. So how we combine both things? How do we keep our lines of communication open with Russia's civil society, which deserves our support? And at the same time, how can we counter the efforts of the regime to make it a closer and more authoritarian and backward country? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we also have an intervention from Greece and from Sweden, and then because I know that inherent in the intervention from Spain, there was a question. We will gather them together and then answer them, if that's all right. So we will come to Greece first and then Sweden.
So thank you so much, and congratulations to the organizers for this very important and rather heavy event. And as previous speakers, I can only underline my admiration to the panelists and empathy for what they've gone through and what their countries are going through. Now, as Greece, we have traditionally very strong ties to Russia, and for us, this is a very distressing situation, and we believe that Russia will come out of this eventually, and we believe in the strength and the heart and the soul of the Russian people. And we salute also the brave Russians who are in Russia now, as one of the speakers said, and who are doing and suffering and running risks. That said, personally, I would not like to be beheaded, even in absentia. But the main point I really want to make is the following. The European Union has adopted sanctions against Russia for the regime's actions in Ukraine, and also for individuals. It's a very complex and delicate process because we need legal certainty. But of course there is a basis for people who are involved in such grave violations to be added to this list of sanctions, and we would also call on all countries to cooperate in fully imposing these sanctions on Russia, because one of the reasons that Russia is still continuing its aggression and still continuing its internal repression is because the sanctions that have been imposed, because we can't have sanctions at the level of the UN, which would be the correct thing to do, which are helping the Russian regime to circumvent these sanctions. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We have 3 more. I would ask you to keep them relatively brief, just because our special rapporteur is due, and you are supposed to be listening to her as well, on the floor of the Human Rights Council shortly. Sweden, Estonia, Ukraine, and then right at the back, Turkey. So we'll start with Sweden.
Thank you, and again, thanks to the organizers and admiration and support from our side to all you panelists and the work and the efforts that you are pursuing. 2 parts of a similar question to what my Spanish colleague just raised. What is your current assessment, any of you who are able to make such an assessment, of how resilient the Russian population, the normal people, not activists and intellectuals, but normal Russians are to disinformation, untruths today? And do you have any asks when it comes to what, in addition to what is already being done, can be done to strengthen the resilience, so to speak, to the policies of the current Russian regime?
Estonia and Ukraine, and don't worry, I'm taking a note of these questions. We won't forget them.
Thank you so much. I would like to thank organizers of this event, but foremost the panelists sharing your stories, your very powerful, to some extent unbearable testimonies that show the level of repression that the Russian Federation is at the moment in. But Madame Kazarova said that the reports that you are presenting to the HRC, now the third already, are manuals of repression. I find it extremely strong, this expression, but it is true. But anyhow, we wish to wholeheartedly thank you for these reports, for presenting them to the HRC. I think it's considering that there is seems to be a total sense of impunity in Russia at the moment. It is so important that we collect and document all these abuses, crimes, and suffering of the people. So I don't have a question, but I would just like to underline the importance of accountability in this context, and in Estonia we are also very much working with the media literacy, but that was also underlined by one of the panelists. So yes, full support, and being myself coming from a country that has once been occupied by Soviet Union, and remembering still the means that this regime used, then yeah, it's very important to continue this fight. Thank you.
Ukraine.
Thank you very much. Thank you for organizing this event, and I'm really proud to be in a company with such prominent speakers. Everyone is a big name for me. I respect you all very much. But let me start from saying that I'm so happy to see Vladislav Lysipenko free. My previous posting was in Vienna. I mentioned your name from 19 till 23 so many times. So I'm really happy that you are free now and that you are strong and you continue to be strong. Thank you from all of us for that. It was really interesting to hear about culture, new culture abroad. I mean, the culture which is more progressive one, or to be considered more progressive one. I think it is important also that as representatives of this culture which is not led by government, which is not paid or is written or presented from kind of pressure, it is really important to have it more visible. That's why this event is even more appreciated, because if there are only sporadic voices of how it would be good if it would be, it's not heard in Russia, first of all. And we know that Putin may start taking into account anything when it is powerful, when it sounds powerful, be it in the field, be it in the politics, or be it in the culture. So, and how to make it more visible? Maybe if you would help all to distinct more what is a real culture, what is a culture not of Russian culture, I mean, what is a culture not of propaganda type, but a real, original culture for culture, if I may say so, but not the culture which is propagating or proceeding from imperial goals or supporting existing regime. Maybe it could be the way. I'm just in a brainstorm mood. And the last remark I heard from Svetlana Alexeyevich that small Russian people, I don't remember exactly, you mentioned, do you think that they are still Russian? Красные человечки. Мне кажется, что они уже не красные, они уже коричневые скорее. So the red people mentioned, I think they are not red. Russianism is now more of brown color, at least mixed red and brown. If you look to how fascism is described in internal politics, so you may find about 20 same things out of 26 in today's Russia. So Russianism is not even not red, but almost fully brown. Thank you.
Thank you very much. For our final intervention, we have a representative from Turkey. I think it's right at the back there.
Thank you so much. It's actually Czechy in French, which is Czech Republic in English, but no worries. I'm very far. Well, first of all, thank you so much to the organizers for getting us together today. And of course, huge thanks to all the panelists for your powerful yet very sobering interventions. I would have a question to the special representative, but maybe other panelists can give their opinion too. So could you, Madam Katsarova, could you confirm, since the beginning of your mandate, and based on the data and your findings, that the political oppression and the crackdown on civil society has been increasing in Russia? And why do you think it is so? Could it be that the regime, the Putin regime, may feel threatened or scared? Or is it just out of pleasure? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sorry, you're a very long way away and I could only see the T. But anyway, so the Czech Republic. So we had a variety of questions from our different diplomats here. From Spain, it was what more can we do to support? We had a question about how resilient are normal Russians, not the ones we hear on the state-controlled TV or coming from the Kremlin, but normal ones, to misinformation. Again, perhaps what more can be done to protect real or promote real culture, Ukraine asked about. And finally, some specific questions to you, Mariana, about the increase in repression. Who wants to go first? Boris, Mariana?
I think I'm going to answer the question, what can be done to help, because that's why we are here today, all of us. So, but first, a little preface. So I think the problem is that from outside, Russia looks not like the way it really is. I mean the Russian society. Russia is a double-headed eagle, virtually. So it has two small heads, one looks to the west, one to the east, and there's this huge body, the Russian people, the population. And for centuries, those two heads, those two Russian ideologies, two cultures, to answer your question, have been fighting for the influence on the body. And the result has been different. At times, one head, the imperialist head, was winning. They could call themselves any names. It could be Tsarist Russia, it could be Bolshevik Russia, it doesn't matter. They had the power. At certain points, the other head, the democratic, the liberal, the freedom-loving head was in power, like we saw it recently in 1990s. And it was always about fighting for the attention, for the support of the body. And Putin understands this much better than the West. And the reason for his repressions is exactly this. He does everything to make us, the other head, shut up and to intimidate the rest of the people. So, why it is important to support Russian political prisoners? Because those are people who are not afraid to speak, who can speak to the people. So, while Putin does everything to shut them up, you, if you want to help, please support them. What I mean by support? I mean that in all your dealings, I don't now mean the UN, I mean your countries, your governments. When you deal with Putin, with his country, always stick the list of political prisoners, journalists in his face. Please tell him that we monitor each of these people. We want to defend them. So this will make their position in prison less vulnerable. If you have a chance to exchange them, do it. This is the kind of support that you can provide, and please do. We have here a representative of Memorial Society, which has all the information, all the names. Please do this. And one more thing about the sanctions. The sanctions that the West has used against Russia, as we all see, are not productive because they are based on the same misconception. The idea was to make Russian people suffer with the hope that they would revolt. This does not happen in a dictatorship. The only aim it achieves is to make those people feel isolated, hated by the outside world, and unite around their so-called leader. So they help Putin, actually. I mean, those sanctions which hit not at Putin's finances, but just at normal Russians. So please think about this too. This doesn't help us. This hurts us, because we need Russian people to believe that the world is on their side, that the world wants to free them, not to punish them, not to isolate them, not to ban them. So this is what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Svetlana, I'm going to put that similar question to you before we go some final words from Mariana, and then, of course, very closing remarks from the ambassador from Poland. But the question was, what should these people be doing?
Мне кажется, что никто не может помочь народу, если он сам себя не вытащит из ямы. И действительно очень правильно было сказано, что красный человек становится коричневым. В общем-то, что могут сделать страны, понять и почувствовать, что в Россию вползает фашизм. Мы имеем дело с нарождающимся фашизмом, который может делать все с человеком. И я однажды недавно спросила у американского журналиста одного, но почему Трамп, откуда Трамп? Он сказал, это говорит о понижении планки, о понижении образования. Вот в этом главная проблема, что произошло за последние 20-30 лет. Это помогло родиться фашизму опять очень как-то неожиданно для всех нас, потому что мы решили, что коммунизм умер, мы уже были рады этому. А что происходит сейчас? Путин покупает Россию. Он купил Россию. Он купил не просто людей за идею, на идею. Он купил их жизни. Они едут и погибают. И недавно я говорила с одним русским, и он мне говорит, я говорю, как вы попали на войну? Вы же такой умный человек, мне кажется. А он говорит, мы собрались, жена, 2 дочери, и поняли, что у нас много проблем, ипотека, машина, и мне надо пойти на войну. Только так я могу поднять уровень жизни моей семьи. И он пошел на войну. И он там вот сейчас, наверное, зарабатывает деньги. Я думаю, все упирается в образование. Потому что мы очень придали большое значение рациональному образованию, рациональному мышлению. Конечно, мы имеем хорошие машины, уже начинает работать искусственный интеллект, но без гуманитарного знания, без хорошего гуманитарного образования, которое надо читать книги, думать, наверное, в школах, и это должны учителя об этом знать, мы не победим зло, которое есть в человеке. Мы не создадим такие машины, которые победят нам зло. Зло может победить только любовь, знание. Вот все опять упирается в образование. И это одна из важных вещей. И надо кончать с тем романтизмом, который был у нас вот последние 20 лет, что мы победили коммунизм. Нет, его остатки еще сильны в людях. Вот я проехала по России, и мне всегда казалось, что это совсем, когда я приезжала в Москву, что это совсем другая страна за кольцевой дорогой. Там именно страна, которая еще и живет идеей коммунизма. Они хотят равенства, справедливости, и они не знают, где точно и кто в этом виноват. Они просто этого хотят. И надо себе четко понять, что коммунист не мертв, и мы все должны что-то сделать, чтобы, в общем-то, воспитывать других людей. Воспитывать людей, которые могут, каждый в одиночку, этому сопротивляться.
Thank you very much. We're getting close to the end. Marianne, I'm going to ask you just to say very few words, basically how people can support your mandate, just quickly, and then we really have to go to our closing remarks.
Well, there was a question from the Czech Republic, and I consider them one of the godfathers and mothers of the mandate, because it was the Czech ambassador who was the president of the council when I was appointed by him. The answer is yes, I do confirm from my findings and monitoring in the past 3 years, it's the 3rd year now, that the repression has escalated and it has become even more creative than, with more creative tools, weaponized in order to crack down on not just the usual suspects, but on anybody who could allow themselves to be against the war or to express some dissent against the government. For example, at the moment, a new law has cracked down on a brand new law this summer on internet searches online and finding extremist materials. It could be the report of my colleague, the independent expert on LGBT rights, but then because it's on the subject of LGBT, it will be considered extremist material, wouldn't it? Or the website of LGBT organization or indigenous people. And there will be charges, for now administrative, but they could be also criminal. Why the government is doing that? Of course, out of insecurity, I think, to consolidate power. I agree with both Svetlana and Boris that the education of the population is very important. That's why the government is cracking down on this as well. Children are indoctrinated in a different type of history, in hatred, practically, to hate Ukraine and the Ukrainians, and to believe that the collective West is out there to get them. That's why, please, talk to your governments, talk to your people and to your parliaments. Don't use blanket approaches against Russia. Now there are plans to introduce bans on all Russians to receive travel bans, to receive tourist visas in the European Union. But we need exceptions for the human rights defenders. They're sitting in this room. They came from inside Russia and outside to be with us in this room today. How could they come to us to speak, see, and talk to us if we don't give them visas? And take care of the ones that are in your countries, because that's very important, that they set up shop and they work on human rights. But not with these really naive and rather dangerous blanket policies, sanctions against torturers and perpetrators. That's what we need. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mariana. And it leaves me finally to give the floor to the ambassador from Poland, I should say one of the key organisers of this event. So a big thanks actually to you as well, before you speak, for such a great event.
Thank you very much, and well, it's not an easy task. Usually it seems that to conclude such event like this, it's a bit easier than to open it, but I think that it's not the case today. This is because we had an absolutely exceptional opportunity to listen testimonies of living legends whom we knew so far only from the books and articles. But let me share with you some takeaways from this meeting. I think that this discussion confirmed the relevance of the mandate of the Special Rapporteur on human rights situation in Russia. We identified today several other arguments for its extension at the current session of the Human Rights Council, and we encourage all members of the Council to support the relevant resolution. I would like to thank everyone that helped to prepare this event, Madam Special Rapporteur, our distinguished panelists, Madam Moderator, interpreter, as well as co-organizers, Belgium, Luxembourg, Netherlands, and all co-sponsors. And let me address special thanks again to our panelists for addressing such an important issues. I would like to thank Mr. Akunin for your alerting appeal to react whenever we see signs and attempts of slicing this political salami. We have to react. I think that our fate is in our hands. I thank Mrs. Kurmasheva for sharing this brutal truth of her feelings while being imprisoned. Thank you very much. I thank Mr. Yasipenko for reminding us of the importance of international solidarity, of helping other societies from the outside. You mentioned Voice of America, you mentioned importance of microphones. This is very important. Thank you very much. And I would like to thank Ms. Alekseyevich for putting this very important question. How is it possible that ordinary people like we, enjoying weekends, doing shopping, can behave like monsters? And let us hope that you find answer to this question in your new book. Ladies and gentlemen, freedom of expression, including freedom of speech, is not only creating a space or allowing to freely address. It is also willingness and readiness to hear it and to accept it, even if we disagree with certain theses presented by someone. This is very important. This is together creates really freedom of expression, and this is why I would like to thank very much you, all of you, for being in such a big number today with us. I thank you very much.
Very short because Mariana is due on stage next door. Thank you all very much.